what are we going to talk about? The general information, the field of literature translation. We know that although we always speak about cultural exchange when it's about translation, the cultural exchange is never equal. This means that we have the so-called central languages, which export cultural products, and this means also literature, and they have a small percentage of translations in themselves, and the peripheral languages, which import the cultural products and have a high percentage of translations. To make it short, Greece is a periphery country, a country of the periphery in translation studies. And I would like to discuss with you what does it take to become a periphery country, and what does it mean to be that, and what is the role of the translators in a country of the periphery. What does it take? It takes, you have to be a small country, definitely, with a language which is not spoken so widely. And maybe I should add, it takes also many years of colonialism, occupation, and financial crisis. This is exactly the case of Greece. So I thought of this idea, the rise and the fall. The rise was obviously in ancient Greece, and which is quite unique, because when you start, for example, in Google, when you start looking for Greek translations, let me see what percentage of translations of Greek literature you have in Canada, in Turkey, or in other countries, then the first that comes up are the translations from ancient Greek, not from modern Greek. Well, ancient Greece was exactly the opposite. It was a very central country in the time of its success, with no translations probably at all, and no interest in learning foreign languages. But on the other hand, ancient Greek was being translated into the other languages of that time, and of course also later. So we see it's all about power relations and, of course, asymmetry, as we will see. So let me take you through Greece's history very, very quickly. Of them in modern times, let's say. Greece was part of Ottoman Empire for 400 years, the south of the country, and for 500 years, the north of the country, where I come from, until 1830. There was an independence war from Greeks against the Ottoman Empire, which lasted for 8 years, from 1821 to 1829. And then, with the help of Great Britain and France and the Russians and the Germans and other the so-called Philaenes of that time, Greece won this war and became independent, but not very long. In less than 2 years, we had Prince Otto of Bavaria as the first king of Greece. The first political parties, and which is also very weird at that time, were called Russian, English, and French. This was the name of the parties, and they were respectively parties aligned with these countries. In 1863, the Bavarian king is deposed, and then the Danish king comes. In 1903, 1912, and 1913, the independence of the rest of Greece comes, and then right after that follow the Balkan Wars, the First World War, then a big war against Turkey, against the Turkish forces at that time, which Greece has lost. with a huge population exchange, about 1 million people, Greeks coming from Turkey, and 500,000 Turks going to Turkey, which is not even Greeks or Turks, but let's say Muslims and Christians. Then right after that, there was a dictatorship, then a Second World War, then the Civil War, very traumatical too, then several governments, quite conservative and with a lot of lack of a democracy, then the military dictatorship until 1974, and since 1975 is Greece a parliamentary republic the way we know it until now. That's not so long ago. And after 25 plus 10, let's say, not even 35 years later, there is the big financial crisis, and there this independent country becomes dependent from the World Monetary Funds, from the banks, and from all the countries that gave Greece, helped Greece through the debt. What happens when an economic crisis comes to a place? We had cuts in funds for universities, for example, in a lot of the things like health system, etc. But since we are in a university here, let's mention that. The rule used to be that for every 5 colleagues who go to pension, 1 new colleague could come to the university. Not even that percentage was really maintained. The research money has also suffered a lot of all these cuts. Then what really concerns us here in our field, in our work, is that the National Book Center shut down. And that means that since then, we have no official data about the books being printed, translated, etc. And if you want to gather data, like I do with my students, it's a work that you cannot imagine, because you have to use different platforms, compare them with each other to find out where are we, how many books were printed this year, last year, etc., from which countries, which languages. Publishing houses shut down. We will see that later too. The books production was released. We will see later about 70% reduced. And of course, at that time, there was no money for the copyright for the translations. So the solution that the Greek publishing houses found in their majority was to retranslate or republish an already existing book. These are the long-term effects for the future, because now, after how much is it? 15 years, we still have no National Book Center, and the landscape with the publishing houses is still very different than it was before. Okay, what does it take to be? What does it mean to be a periphery country, and then inside the country or outside the country? 2 different views. Both have to do with being a central country or peripheral country. Very important that this cultural transfer or exchange, or whatever however we call it, is actually functioning only one way, not both ways. We're not exporting our literature, we're just importing the other one. And the language is, according to the terminology in translation studies, a dominated language. Which, even if you hear the dominated languages, it really sounds not very promising. So the book market, for example, as I said before, in the time between 2009 and 2014, the turnover decreased by 70%. This is really huge. The translated titles, they were reduced and reduced. One talks now about the lost 5 years of books in Greece and the time 2009, 2014. And the National Book Center, it was really shut down from the one day to the other after 19 years of its creation. Let's see the structure of the field in a few words in Greece. Okay, the translators, that's our main subject. We'll talk about it later. The education and training institutions, I take all this from Bourdieu, of course, and his sociology of translation, his sociology of literature, which applies in translation too. Education and training institutions, they play an important role in translation, and yes, they do, and they still produce, the academic institutions at least, produce a huge number of translations in scientific books. There, the majority is also being translated, which is also very important, because that means that this scientific knowledge comes from abroad in Greece. And if you want to be heard like me today here, for example, you have to speak English, even a terrible one, but without that, you cannot be heard by your colleagues nowhere in the world. The libraries and the bookshops, I was so positively surprised here in Toronto when I saw your libraries. I've been to 2 public libraries here, and I was really impressed. And I wish we had something like that in Greece too. The public libraries are not functioning like that. You cannot compare them at all with here, the libraries in Toronto at least, and they are not influencing the field at all, I would dare say. What is important maybe and take some influence in all these translation field is the literary critics and the media, although there is no translation critic, not in Greece, not in many other countries, but yes, there is a lot about literary. There are good literature magazines online and in print. And of course, the publishers and literary agents. This is also very unique. In Greece, there are only 2 literary agents in the whole country. 2 of them trying to promote Greek literature abroad. No one else. And it's almost a profession that is not known, actually. Here a view about the languages of literary translation. Of course, the majority, this is for the time 2010-2020, of course, the majority, over 57%, is from English. Then about 13% from French, German, Spanish, Italian, they are almost the same with 5 to 6%. Then comes Russian, from the Russian language. And then some small languages like Swedish or Norwegian or Portuguese. And then Turkish also, which is very important because Turkey is our neighbor and also the traditional enemy, so to say. And it's so important that we have the translation from Turkish language. And then some other languages with 4%. So the picture is more or less as it is globally. English is the absolute majority concerning the source languages. Number of books without English and French, because there is really just a presentation for itself. But we see, for example, Ibsen, who had the majority of, with 34 books in the same time, But as you might imagine, these are retranslations or old translations of Ibsen. Dostoevsky, for example, the classic ones. And then also, if you see the other names, they are very much the classic ones, and they are very much authors for which you don't have to pay any copyright anymore. Publishing houses, that's more or less the whole field. And then there are many publishing houses, but very, very small, with perhaps up to 10 books every year or even less. And these are the main agents in this field. Castagnot, publishing houses printing literary translations. Castagnotis is the most known one, who is the main agent in importing literature for decades now. Psychoghios, Pataki, Metechmio, etc. And then this last one, Vakhikon, it's a small publishing house actually, but which does almost only translations and from very different languages. And that's also very interesting. The translators now, and this is also an extract from this website with our interviews. And you see here different translators that we have interviewed and how many books they have translated. Let's talk about them. Let's talk about the role of translators, and let's talk about this change from translation studies to translator studies, as Chesterman put it and other scholars do later. Also in this field of translation sociology, we know that we are dealing with translators, with their vita, with their the work they do, and of course with their notes and archives, and we try to see what is going on in this translation field through that. And allow me to present you the project now. This is a project that started in 2016, and it has been continued until now, with an exception during the pandemic, because all the interviews were recorded during the International Book Fair, which takes place in Thessaloniki every May. And this was very convenient for us, of course. And we have then, here is a photograph from then. In 2016, we had for the first time a stand for the translators, which is here, the translators corner, I would say in English. And this was after we have tried to come to the International Book Fair united, the universities, the University of Thessaloniki, University of Athens, and University of Corfu, colleagues from there, and then the professional associations. There are two major associations in Greece, and we tried to unite it to have some space, because I don't this was my initiative, actually. I wrote all of them and I said, I have a dream, the translation in the International Book Fair, and the response was positive. So, because I thought it's not possible, you cannot imagine that you have an international book fair and no translators there being present in a country which lives from translation. So we did that, we had this stand, and we started with the project. And you see here some view of the students who helped us. They are all students from the School of German Language and Literature, and they are PhD students, PhD candidates, they are master students, they are undergraduate students, and this one in the first place is Fotini, my PhD student, who is helping all the time. She has a crucial role in that. So does Despina Lambrou, which you can see here behind the camera, and Stavroula Tsiara, who has done all the subtitles and translations for the site, etc. So we started contacting the translators who came to the International Book Fair and asking them to give an interview. In the beginning, it was something so strange for them because translators don't talk, actually, or they didn't used to. Maybe now they do talk a little bit more than before. So they said, "What do you want to know from me? I'm just a translator." Okay. The next year, it was really strange. Next year, they were coming to us, asking us, are you the person who takes the interview? Can you interview me too? The questions are, the first part, there are actually three major parts. The first part has to do with the personal involvement with translation. How did they begin? Why translation? Why choose this profession? Then the second part, they talk more about the process, difficulties they find with certain books or certain authors or certain cultural expressions or whatever. And the third part has to do with their relations with the editors, the publishers, with the other agents of this field. And of course, we always end the interviews with a question about the future, or what would they say to a student who wants to become a literary translator, etc. These interviews, they can be very useful as research material. And now I have people writing to me because they're doing their work, their PhD thesis or master thesis, and they want more information, etc. Or they asking me, is it possible that you have an interview of that and that which has not been uploaded yet because I'm doing something about him? All right. They are, of course, quite useful as educational material. You know, it's really nice to have all these translators talking to your students and saying the things that you would say too. And it's different if they hear it from someone else than not only from you. But it's also an open database where translators can see other translators, where people can find translators. And it's also promotional for the professional translation, and also maybe guidance in terms of the profession that people might want to do later. I would add also here that there is another dimension, that when, as a reader, when you watch the translators talk about the way they work and the way they translate, the way they put their own things, little things, each of them, depending on his or her habitus, how they put it in the translation, then I think it would lead to emancipation of the readers too. Here we have a colleague in this interview from the University of Corfu, who is also a translator himself and a scholar, of course. And here a view of the English side. And I would like to show you a part of the interview of George Ikaros Babasakis, a very well-known translator from English mainly, who here are some of his translations. As you see, for example, Nabokov, Bukowski, Kerouac, and we will hear him saying that he started with translation also because he wanted to bring authors in Greece who were not, had not been translated before. So,
Σαϊκή, ξανά. Είμαστε πολύ χαρούμενοι που είστε.
so you can read the subtitles, of course, but let's listen to the Greek voices too.
Εδώ μαζί μας για αυτή τη συνέντευξη. Να ξεκινήσουμε λοιπόν.
Ναι.
Ωραία. Ξεκινάμε με λίγες ερωτήσεις σχετικά με το πώς ήρθε στη ζωή σας η μετάφραση. Πώς ξεκινήσατε λοιπόν, πώς προέκυψε?
Προέκυψε ελαφρώς στοιχεία, δηλαδή μια παρέα ολόκληρη φίλη τέλη δεκαετίας του 70 μεταφράζαμε γιατί δεν βρίσκαμε στα ελληνικά τα βιβλία τα οποία τότε μας βοήθευαν η γενιά των Beat Generation, ο Jack Kerouac Barrows, Gregory Corso και τα λοιπά, Allen Ginsberg. Οπότε αρχίσαμε σιγά σιγά μόνοι μας, με τα ολίγη στα αγγλικά που ξέραμε, να μεταφράσουμε και να δίνουμε τα κείμενα ένα στον άλλον και να τα συζητάμε, να τα κουβεντιάζουμε. Μετά κάναμε και λίγο κόντρες ποιος μεταφράζει καλύτερα. Οπότε κάπως έτσι ξεκίνησα από έλλειψη βιβλίων τα οποία μας ενδιέφεραν.
Και μετά πώς εξελίχθηκε αυτή η αρχική?
Μετά, όπως δίδαξε ο Μέγας Μάνος Χατζηδάκης, τα πάντα στην Ελλάδα γίνονται στα καφενεία. Οπότε σε ένα καφενείο στη Σόλωνος συναντηθήκαμε ο Ευγένιος Αρανίτσης, ο Μανώλης ο Μανουσάκης και η παιδιά μου. Στήθηκε ένας εκδοτικός οίκος που λέγεται Ρατό. Εγώ μετέφρασα ούτως ή άλλως διηγήματα του Ναμπόκοφ για δικιά. Και όπως γινόταν ο εκδοτικός οίκος, αγοράστηκαν εντός εισαγωγικών μεταφράσεις αυτών των διηγημάτων του Ναμπόκοφ. Μια Ρωσίδα Καλονή ήταν μάλιστα ο τίτλος. Και βγήκαν σε ένα μικρό τόμο. Αυτό με βοήθευσε. Και μετά το ένα έφερε το άλλο.
Έχετε πλέον πολλά χρόνια εμπειρία στον χώρο. Τι θα λέγατε ότι σημαίνει για εσάς μεταφράζω?
Μεταφράζω σημαίνει, από μια πρακτική άποψη, σημαίνει ότι κάνω μια δουλειά μέσα στο σπίτι μου. Δηλαδή, η εργασία είναι στο λεγόμενο γραφειόσπιτο, όπως λέγαμε και παλιά. Δηλαδή, σπίτι και γραφείο, χώρος εργασίας και χώρος κατοικίας είναι το ίδιο πράγμα. Το οποίο με βολεύει πάρα πολύ, αλλά κυρίως είναι το ότι σε ένα κοινό να διαβάσει κάτι το οποίο σε έχει γοητεύσει και το οποίο δεν μπορεί να το διαβάσει γιατί δεν ξέρει αγγλικά, γαλλικά, γερμανικά, ιαπωνικά και πάει λέγοντας. Οπότε ο μεταφραστής, σαν ένας γλυκύτατος μεσολαβητής, βοηθάει ανθρώπους να κοινωνήσουν μια κουλτούρα, ας πούμε, ένα πολιτισμό, μια λογοτεχνία, μια φιλοσοφία από μια άλλη χώρα, μια άλλη γλώσσα. Το οποίο είναι σχεδόν φιλανθρωπικό.
Όσον αφορά τη διαδικασία της μετάφρασης και τα είδη κειμένων, έχετε κάποιο είδος λογοτεχνίας ή κάποιο είδος κειμένου που αγαπάτε περισσότερο? Σας αρέσει πιο πολύ να μεταφράζετε?
Μ' αρέσει να μεταφράζω μυθιστορήματα τα οποία είναι στο μετέχνιο λογοτεχνίας και θεωρίας. Δηλαδή, υπάρχουν κάποιοι συγγραφείς οι οποίοι δεν είναι storytellers, δεν σου λένε απλώς μια ιστορία, αλλά θίγουν και ένα σκασμό άλλα ζητήματα και αυτό με βοηθεύει πάρα πολύ. Αλλά έχουμε μεταφράσει και δοκίμια, αμοιβό δοκίμια δηλαδή, και φιλοσοφία και όλα αυτά. Και προχωράω με αυτόν τον τρόπο. Δηλαδή, ας πούμε, τώρα μεταφράζω Jonathan Franzen και αμέσως μετά να μεταφράσω David Foster Wallace, που είναι συγγραφείς οι οποίοι θίγουν και πολλά άλλα πράγματα πέρα του να σου πούνε μια ιστορία.
Okay, I'm sorry, but there seems to be some problems with the Zoom.
Πάει κορίτσι και ούτω καθεξής.
So the software crashed. It's fine. I'm very sorry. I'm very, very sorry for that, but there is nothing that we can do. This is technology. We can send something. Yes.
And
Yes.
the video.
Yes, exactly. That's what we can do. I would like to thank you for being with us and say until the next time, and we will try to upload the PowerPoint and the videos then. Okay, thank you.
But maybe you have any questions to Auntie?
Can we ask questions?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Please do, because it's so weird. Sit there and sit over there.
Wherever you're comfortable. This is really fascinating. I'm sure the whole thing.
But we can see maybe the whole just Zoom flash, because we can shut out the Zoom and just have a look at the page maybe.
Look at page, right? Okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
is it
so-
possible?
Yes, I need to start
This,
here.
this one,
This one, right?
okay,
I need to start at
yes.
Perfect. Yeah, so what you're doing basically is oral history project, right?
Yes.
And I was just wondering, because, to me, these projects are wonderful to have. And it's kind of daunting because I can see you started this as a one-person project. And then, you're working towards creating this large archive.
I started it as one person project with my students.
Right, but still, I mean.
And then a year later, I started searching for money
Mhm.
because I thought, okay, how much can these poor students do? You have to really find some money,
Mhm.
small amount,
Mhm.
for the mixage, the montage, the translation,
it's
the
very
subtitling.
professional.
It's really, I hope we can see the page right now. You will see, it's really professional, yes.
Mhm, mhm. So you were able to find some funding at the end of the day? A
Bit,
little
it's
bit?
over. I
Oh.
have here 54 interviews and I have over 50 interviews at home, which I don't have the money to upload yet.
And
But
yeah,
we
so
will make it.
what will happen to them at the end? I mean, to me, this looks like something that needs to be embraced institutionally and should be hosted somewhere.
It is hosted in the at our university.
Mhm.
It is hosted there, but yes, for me, it needs something more than one university, maybe.
Yeah, because I mean, clearly this is very important now. It's going to be even more important 50 years from now. So all these questions about what happens to digital material, who
Yes,
keeps them,
yes.
what happens to
What
the
we said
ethics
yesterday.
and all that,
Yeah.
that is just, I mean, it's exciting and it's also very daunting. So I congratulate you. It's just
Yeah.
fascinating.
And you know this, thank you very much, but you know this, what happened, that it will be interesting later, yes. Meanwhile, 2 good colleagues have died from the people that
See,
we
that's
have
so
interviewed.
important. Yeah.
And you know, in both times, the one was this year, the other one was already a year after the interview she gave, or a few months. And the only material they found to talk about the translation work of them were these interviews.
Oh my
And the one I wanted to show it actually, it's the translator of Umberto Eco. The other one has translated major French authors, and really important people, and there were nothing about them. And they showed both in interviews, then in radio. I heard the interview in TV, in 2 events in Athens. They were showing our interviews. It's weird, actually. But you know,
They're
they
lucky.
die.
They die, but you're lucky to have this
Yes,
material for them.
yes.
Doing them a very big service to be remembered.
They are doing the service for all of us.
Mm.
And if they accept to talk, even more so, yes.
Well, I mean, as you, we have so many things to talk about because there's so many similarities between our projects, so many. And well, I'll start with maybe to kick some ideas around. One, well, there's the scope, and then there's the questions, actually, the actual questionnaire, the kinds of things that you want to discuss or highlight. And then the wonderful comparative perspective that we can create when we have these projects that involve not one single person that we want to enshrine as if it were the figure, the most important, but just many, you know, and
Yeah.
then I like that
Yeah.
quality of your project also, that like, you just want a multitude, you know, the singularity, but also the many. So, I guess when I pick up from what Shanaz was saying on the question of the scale of the project, we start thinking of a project that is manageable, and then you realize that the scale is actually a large scale
Yes.
project. We were in the History of Translation Network conference in Graz, and now there's a working group on large scale projects.
Yeah.
And so I think it's helpful and it's daunting also to think of, because usually researchers in the humanities were used to doing things more or less on our own, like we're not,
Yeah.
our research skills don't come from these massive teams of researchers that they do in labs in the sciences. But these are STEM, these are teams.
Yes,
This becomes a team project. And so the questions of research become about research, design, and then implementation have to do with team building, with storage of large amounts of data, with, how to standardize without, eliminating singularities, like all kinds of things. So what do you feel, what do you think about this question of research design and team building and so on, like, because it seems to me that it didn't start that big and then it becomes big.
Yes.
Yeah.
yes. I'm almost stopping these two PhD students, from the 3D one is ready already. And she lives in Luxembourg now. She works there. So I have the other two, Fotini and Stavroula. And this May, during the exhibition, I said no interviews. They were, but why? And Aurelia is going to be there and Maria Constanza, and we have to have them too because they're important. I said, no, first we have to upload the other ones and see what is going on and then continue. We cannot just continue interviewing people without any end. It has to stop at some time. It's a very large project.
And what if it doesn't have to stop?
Yes, but then perhaps someone else could take over or
That's what I meant when I said institutional.
yes.
So I don't know if you collaborate with the history department, if they have any oral history archives.
They do.
I don't know. I mean, to
Actually.
me, this is something wonderful, but it's also a part of history.
Yes.
Your country is very important
Yes.
recent history.
Yes.
So, this project will definitely find its use not only within translation studies and literature, but in different disciplines too.
Yes.
I mean, there's so much material there.
Yes.
And it can be used by so many different disciplines. I find it fascinating. And I mean, it's a shame that it has to stop, but you
It
have
has
to find the
stop
modality.
because yes, because I have to find a way to keep doing that.
Yeah.
While really doing that and not having people interviewed and then they realize that the interview doesn't appear because what? Because someone has to get paid to do that. And I said, okay, no more for free. Stop. That's also enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for me, it was the first time that I actually sat. That I actually sat and fully understood the project that you're
Mhm.
doing. Because it was presented in our graduate conference last year. But I was too busy with having everything other things
course.
under control. So for me, a major thing about this project is that its scopus, it changes while it continues. It may start as a project for the world to realize the importance of the translators and that they do exist and that the book that they have in their hands, someone has sat and spent time to translate it. But as we move forward in a world where the actual existence of literature translation has a question mark, it's also a valuable contribution to a future with none of it existing.
Yes.
And I believe that if we have, for example, a project like this going on in Greece, a project like this going on in Turkey and in Northern Europe, in South America, Central America, and just compare them. So if in a wonderful world where money comes to research, there could be projects like this to just compare the different backgrounds and the habitats of each country, the translation in each country through the eyes of the translators,
Um,
then it will never end.
Just,
Yes, okay.
just
Well,
an
I mean,
idea.
Really, if you look at them and you know their stories and what they have translated, they are really the history, as you said. History of us. They have translated all the books that we have read and made us what we are. That's why I was talking yesterday about people who deal with translation studies. For me, are people who, translation studies is part of your education, of being an educated person, as you have to know who is Goethe, even if you don't have read anything about from him. The same way you have to know what happens with translation in literature, in sciences, in fields which really influence the perception of the world, the perception of the science, etc., etc. These are, look at them.
I just love
They-
the
they are
multitude
amazing.
that you render, it's just fantastic.
Yeah,
So, but
this
they are,
side, yeah,
just put
very
them all
nice.
together.
Yeah.
And then, they're so different, so different. This one is one of my favorite. This is Margaris, Petros Margaris, who is an author of criminal novels and very famous in Greece and abroad, one of the few authors who are being translated. And he has translated Faust. And he has translated Brecht for the first time in Bertolt Brecht, from the first time from German, because before the 70s, it was being translated via French, and a lot of things were, of course, different. And this one, Achilles Kyriakidis, one of famous translator, author, documentary filmmaker, really a persona in Greek scholars, under Greek scholars. This one, a dear colleague, she's teaching at the University of Athens French department. And she is translating from Portuguese. She is translating Pessoa. If you want to read Pessoa in Greek, then you will read her translation. He translates maybe one of the two in Greece, who translates from a Norwegian. And he is another dear colleague in the University of Thessaloniki. He translates from Spanish and from all the countries of Latin America. One of very, very, she's the one who died this year, a colleague also in the University of Athens. And then you see, if you listen to them, you see how many times they say the same things. The majority started to translate because it was a way to make some money while studying, before, I don't know, doing the right profession, but then stuck with the wrong one. And then they continued because they wanted to change the world, means bring the authors they wanted to Greece. But then they are also very different. Some of them say, no editors. I don't want any editor. Nobody after my book, my text is the best. Some of them say, no, I never read a book until the end before I translate it. It would be so boring if I did that. Others say you have to read it 10 times, and then you have to listen to it, and like your heart, it's the rhythm, etc. of the book. It's so different. It's so interesting. They are not the same, and they don't see the word. This one is the one of Umberto Eco, Efika Lifatidi, who died, unfortunately, some months after the interview, and this interview is the only material we have about her. In every page, you find a description of the interview in English and of course in Greek too. So you can look then with keywords what you want. The questions are more or less same, of course not really. A short CV and the selected translations with a link to the book, so you can have some more information about it. For example, that. Calvino, and here you see all the data of this book, and then of course the title in the original. And yeah, and then here all the. So that's it. Yes.
Yeah, I have a technical question because it varies from country to country, you know, how we define the literature. So
Yes.
in Greece, do you include also poetry,
Yes,
theater?
poetry, theater, yes.
Okay,
And we have a lot of poetry and a lot of theater too. I mean, we have two Nobel authors, Kavafis and Seferis, not Kavafis, sorry, Elidis and Seferis, and they were both poets. Which is really strange,
mhm.
actually, yes. We love poetry.
So if you don't have any question, I have another question.
go
Yeah,
ahead.
so yes, I'm wondering what's the next step? So is your goal to deliver, you know, these interviews as raw data? Or are you planning at a certain point to start publishing, analyzing,
this
or
is,
it's already done?
Yes,
Okay.
good question. Reminds me why I will have, after 1 week, a sabbatical for a year to write a book.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And I would like to write one analyzing more or less all I have from these 100 interviews and combining it with the real data of the translations in the 21st century in Greece.
That's huge.
Yeah, okay.
I have the data
Huge. Wow.
thanks to other students. I love my students and they still love me. I don't know how, how long, for how long. But yes, we have worked together, as I wrote in my CV, to collect data about the translations in Greece in the 21st century. And we had all the details until last year, all the details about all languages, but not English or French, because these were really huge. And then after our meeting, et cetera, I thought, okay, now let's start with English. And now we also have all the English translations. We have the data. Where were they from? Were they from Canada? From the US? Or from where? Or the French, exactly. And then, of course, with special love for the Caribbean translation too. Yeah.
So yeah, I'm actually wondering because it's like a new term that, you know, I came across in, you know, doing research in translation studies, like auto-theorizing or
Mhm.
auto-theory. So that's right, that the practitioners actually producing some kind of theory of translation, right?
Yes.
I guess you will investigate that next year, right?
Yes.
And you will be on your
Actually,
sabbatical.
what is the theory behind it? The theory for me is all the sociological turn, which really was something that I could work with. It suits very much my character, my personality, the way I think. And so I found really everything I hear about it is fascinating for me. I was never the kind of scholar who would just, let's say just, which is not really fair, but let's say just compare an original with a translation, that's not enough.
Mm.
I searched for another question. Why did you translate it like that? Why was he translated and not he, and et cetera, et cetera. So this is all this sociology, so I love it. But to tell you the truth, is this really theory? These are some methodological instruments, tools, which are very useful, but I don't know if this is theory. And I always have this question in the translation studies, in the field of translation studies. We are not really producing theory. We are studying and we analyze in with certain methodologies, different in different times, different between us, but methodologies. And that's I think that is theory in translation studies, more or less.
That
It's not
also
like
depends on
like
your
we are
definition of
inventing.
what you think theory. But going back to Aurelia, I think it's fascinating to see whether these individual translators, through their discourse, were producing some kind of a theory of translation in their minds,
That is,
expressing it.
Yeah.
yeah,
So,
that you meant that
Yeah,
actually.
yes,
Yeah.
auto theory.
Ah, yeah, you mean that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yes, they do. They do.
Probably.
Yeah, and the
Mm.
stars among them.
Yeah.
The youngers are a bit more shy, but the olders, they are.
Yeah, going back to that, there is a theory behind what they say. Sometimes it's not that it's original to them, but they're
Yes.
reflecting a
Mm.
theory of language and of culture and of writing and of the world that they are immersed in. And that's something that I find that it's very, when you have a project like this, it's perfect to see the generational differences or even gender differences.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That there
Yeah.
are, or even people who come from what we were talking about yesterday, from different intellectual traditions. It's that intellectual tradition that will inform them whatever, however they theorize or they make sense of their own practice. I think it's what you're saying, it's very important to be able to look at that.
Can I ask you something? Did you have two different translators who translated the same book?
No,
No.
no, I have some who has retranslated the same book after 30 years or something. Was not very happy with it, but
The
still,
original translation was
by
hers.
himself, yeah,
Oh, but
by
his-
him, yes.
Ah,
And then he did it again 30 years later. And
person?
Yeah.
the same person. It's really strange.
Oops, so sorry.
No, go ahead.
Just to piggyback on what you said about generational differences. Now, when you were mentioning this, I'm also, throughout your talk, I'm always comparing back with my own context,
Yes.
Turkey, right? Which is extremely similar in so many ways, being peripheral. So to you, Turkey is not peripheral, maybe because of historical reasons.
Sorry, it's not peripheral, even because it's so big.
Yeah, to us,
really
it's very
big. And
peripheral.
the language, I mean, you cannot, how
Yeah,
many people live in Turkey?
86 million.
86.
Yeah.
86
But to us,
million.
Turkish
And then
is a
also in
peripheral.
diaspora abroad.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
in Greece,
We're
Greece is
10.
now
No.
11 millions.
I
the most.
agree. I agree.
So it's 8 times bigger.
Yeah.
And you have 8 times more people
Yeah,
speaking
but it's
this
all about
language.
self-images, right? That's
Of
not the
course,
self-image
of
that
course,
certain
yes.
people are. But to go back to generational differences, in Turkey, what we see with the older generation is a lot of authors, writers, poets are also translators, or
Yes.
scholars also translators.
Yes.
We are seeing this change with the younger generation. So the younger generation is seeing translation more and more as a profession in itself that
Exactly.
is done. So are you also noticing something like
Yes,
that? Yeah.
Yes. Actually, I'm noticing more differences between the generations than between the genders. Maybe
Mm.
it has to do with the questions, because I'm sure that if I had asked, and this is a mistake that I haven't done it, if I had asked, where in your house do you work?
Yeah.
The
Excellent
majority of the women work either in the kitchen or in the bedroom.
That's an excellent question.
And not only in literature translation, also the practical translators. But yes, with the generations, first, yes, already here we have 3 authors who are also very good translators. We have translated a lot. But the older generation, the generation before, because here the oldest are a little bit older than me, maybe. But the generation before us, this was extremely occupied with both, which was not always very good. I mean, they might have been better poets or authors or something than translators, after all. The attitude is very different. The younger generation is not so self-confident, but of course it comes with the age also. Although most of them have studied translation, maybe not literary translation, but something like that. But they are not so confident like the older ones. The older ones, they like, they occupy the room, like, and we speak sometimes from the, how is it called in English, suppressed habitus of the translator. Here, my translators, not even the young ones, no one is suppressed, no one. They are really, I am translating, I'm doing that, I'm doing the other thing, really confident.
It's also a cultural thing, maybe.
Maybe, yes.
Okay.
This question is predictable. It's about archives, the papers of the translators, that's, my research is on, it's a similar project, but with respect, a big portion of it is with respect to the archives, the drafts, the letters, all the correspondence and all the papers of manuscripts that are not published. So, or the pre-figure, predate published work. And I find that in those papers also you find a lot of the institutional questions that you're interested in looking at in sociology. Have they talked about that? Have they talked about, paper versus computer and what they keep and how they?
I haven't asked precisely this question. As a matter of fact, after our exchange and your influence, I started asking some people, like, for example, yes, she does a lot of, she over there, she does a lot of Russian literature. She told me she has a lot of notes. She translates a lot of also Russian, Bulgarian, and Macedonian. She has notes, she told me. Then I have here this one, Rensidaki Alexandra, who is also a colleague, and she translates from German, a colleague at the university, professor. She translates from German, and then the difficult ones, like Rilke, etc. And she has a lot of notes too. And maybe that would be another idea. Now, let's start. Give me your notes.
Yeah.
Let me have a look at them. Yes. They even have a lot of them have just a blog with the name of the book they translate, and they keep all their notes there, handwritten. That's interesting.
Yeah.
And then the first, the second, the third, if one is not enough,
Yeah.
actually, yes, in the traditional way.
Very interesting.
Yeah. So thank you so much.